In court, my parents claimed that I was immature and couldn't handle money. Their lawyer grinned, as if everything had already been decided. They wanted my bank account, my car, even the apartment I had paid for myself. Then the bailiff opened his folder and began to read out the list. At the third item, the judge suddenly recoiled, his eyes wide open. "Stop immediately. Get security in here," he shouted, and my parents froze. "Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." Before the judge screamed. Before the bailiff read that list. There was just the quiet. My life was built on silence. I lived in a converted industrial loft in Chicago's West Loop. To an outsider, it might look stark: exposed brick, polished concrete floors, humidity sensors blinking soft red lights in the corners. But to me, it was a sanctuary. It was paid for. Every square inch of it belonged to me. Not a bank. And certainly not my parents. My name is Jasmine. And I am a numismatist. I specialize in rare currency and antiquities authentication. I spend my days looking at things that other people spend without thinking: quarters, bills, old certificates, and finding the microscopic flaws that make them worth millions. I understand value. I understand that what looks like a dirty penny to a novice might be a 1943 copper alloy worth more than a luxury sedan. My parents, Gregory and Catherine, never understood value. They only understood price. They lived 30 miles north in Lake Forest, in a sprawling, drafty mansion that smelled of old cedar and desperation. From the outside, they were the picture of old money charity galas, leased luxury SUVs, country club memberships. But inside, the wallpaper was peeling, and the air was thin with tension. They performed wealth. I possessed it. To them, I was the peculiar daughter, the one who didn't marry a finance bro, the one who didn't care about gala season. They called my work cute or dusty. They asked when I was going to get a real job or find a husband to take care of me. They viewed my solitude as a defect, a crack in the mint condition of their family portrait. The attack arrived on a Tuesday afternoon via a private courier. It wasn't a letter, it was a heavy packet of legal documents. I signed for it, feeling the weight of the paper in my hands. I sat at my kitchen island, a slab of reclaimed granite, and opened it. Petition for emergency guardianship. I read the words, but they didn't make sense. It was like looking at a counterfeit bill. The font was right, the seal was right, but something was fundamentally wrong. I kept reading. The petition claimed that I, Jasmine, was suffering from severe mental instability and hoarding disorder. The evidence, my security system. The document listed my biometric locks, my climate-controlled storage room, and my reluctance to let family visit as proof of dangerous paranoia. They had twisted my professional standards into a pathology. They claimed I was living in squalor, guarding piles of junk metal and worthless old paper, and that I was a danger to myself. They didn't see a business. They didn't see a collection of historical artifacts. They saw a single woman living alone with a high-security safe. And they decided to label it madness. They wanted the court to grant them immediate control over my person and my property for my own protection. I looked around my loft. It was spotless. It was precise. It was the home of a woman who knew exactly who she was. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to erase me. I didn't scream. I didn't call them to beg for an explanation. In my line of work, when you spot a fake, you don't argue with it. You verify it. And then you destroy its value. I picked up my phone and called Laura. Laura's office was nothing like the suffocating, wood-paneled rooms my father frequented. It was all glass, steel, and biting cold air conditioning. Laura was a high-stakes estate litigator, a woman who wore stilettos as weapons and viewed emotions as inefficiencies. I had hired her because she didn't offer tea and sympathy, she offered strategy. I sat across from her, watching her read the petition. Her face was a mask of professional boredom, but I saw the slight tightening of her jaw. She flipped the page, her eyes scanning the accusations of squalor and fiscal irresponsibility. "They've painted quite a picture," Laura said, tossing the file onto her desk. "According to this, you're one step away from being buried alive under a pile of newspapers and cat food cans. They claim your obsession with metals is a symptom of severe cognitive decline." I didn't flinch. In my business, you learn to spot the difference between a scratch and a mint mark. This petition was a scratch ugly, but superficial. It didn't change the value of the coin underneath. "It's a leverage play," I said, my voice steady. "They don't care about my mental health. They care about liquidity. They think I have a few $1,000s hidden in that safe. And they want it." Laura leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "And do you have a few $1,000s?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the inventory binder. I had prepared it myself, certified by 3 independent grading services. I slid it across the glass table, turned to page 4. Laura opened the binder. She scanned the first few lines. Then she stopped. She looked up at me, then back at the page. She ran a finger down the column of estimated values. "St. Gaudens, double eagles," she read, her voice dropping an octave. "1933 issue. Proof sets. Jasmine." "This total. 4.2 million? I corrected gently. "Conservatively. The market for pre-war gold is bullish right now." Laura closed the binder. She looked at me with a new kind of respect. It wasn't warmth. It was the recognition of a fellow predator. "They think you're hoarding trash. You're sitting on an empire. Why didn't you tell them? Why let them think you were struggling?" I looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. "Because every coin in that safe represents a time I didn't call them." This was the invisible ledger. Most people measure wealth in what they can buy. I measured mine in what I didn't have to pay for with my dignity. When my car broke down 5 years ago, I didn't ask Gregory for a loan. I bought a rare silver dollar at an estate sale, flipped it for 3 times the price, and fixed the engine myself. When I needed a down payment for the loft, I didn't beg Catherine for an advance on my inheritance. I liquidated a small collection of Civil War currency. My net worth wasn't just a number. It was a physical record of my silence. Every gold ounce was a scream I swallowed. Every rare mint was a crisis I handled alone. They saw a daughter who was withdrawn. I saw a woman who was buying her freedom, ounce by ounce, until she owned herself completely. I didn't hide it. "Laura," I said, meeting her gaze. I just never invited them into the vault. They assumed I was empty because I wasn't asking them to fill me up. Laura smiled. It was a terrifying, beautiful thing. She tapped her manicured nail on the petition. "They walked into a bear trap," she said softly. "They think they're coming to rescue a drowning child. They have no idea they're declaring war on a sovereign nation." She pulled a legal pad toward her. "We're going to need a forensic accounting of their finances. If they're this desperate, there's a reason. People like Gregory and Catherine don't try to lock up their children unless the wolves are already at the door." "Find the wolves," I said, "and let's let them in." 3 days later, I was back in Laura's office. The air conditioning was humming a low, steady note. The only sound in the room, besides the turning of pages. Laura had placed a thick dossier on the desk between us. It was bound in black plastic. unassuming. But it held the autopsy report of my parents' reputation. It's worse than we thought, Laura said, her voice devoid of surprise. Your father isn't just having a bad year, Jasmine. He's facing a federal indictment. She slid a document toward me. It was a notice from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Gregory and your brother, Tyler, launched a private real estate crypto fund 18 months ago, Laura explained. They promised investors a 12% return based on property acquisitions that never happened. It's a Ponzi scheme, Jasmine. And it just collapsed. I stared at the numbers. They owed $10 million in fines and restitution. If they didn't pay within 30 days, they weren't just losing the country club membership, they were going to federal prison. The picture snapped into focus with a terrifying clarity. The petition for guardianship wasn't an intervention, it was a raid. They didn't care about my mental health. They needed a solvent asset to liquidate. And they needed it immediately. I was the piggy bank they intended to smash open to pay their bail. They threw Tyler a launch party for this fund. I said, my voice quiet. They rented a yacht. They called him a disruptor, a visionary. I looked up at Laura, feeling the cold iron of anger settle in my stomach. That's the real joke. Isn't it Tyler loses millions of dollars of other people's money? And he's an entrepreneur, with a setback. He's bold. He's taking risks. But me, I tapped the inventory of my collection. I accumulate $5 million in verified, appreciating assets. And I'm mentally unstable. I'm a hoarder. If I were a man, sitting on a pile of gold eagles and rare currency, they'd call me a hedge fund. They'd call me a genius. But because I'm a woman living alone who doesn't need them, my wealth is a pathology. It's a sickness they have to cure by taking it away. It was the oldest trick in the patriarchal playbook: pathologize a woman's independence so you can justify stealing it. They couldn't handle the reality that the faulty daughter was the only solvent entity in the family tree. They had to rewrite the narrative so that my success was actually a symptom of madness. And their fraud was just a misunderstanding. They're counterfeiters, I said, closing the dossier. They've been passing themselves off as successful people for decades. But there's no silver in the alloy. It's all base metal. Laura nodded. They are desperate, Jasmine. And desperate people make mistakes. They've fast-tracked the hearing because the SEC deadline is looming. They need access to your safe before the feds seize their accounts. They want to start a war, I said, standing up. Fine. But they forgot the first rule of numismatics. What's that? Laura asked. Always check the provenance. I said, they think they own me. They're about to find out they don't even own themselves. The inspection was scheduled for Friday morning. It was a tactical intrusion, sanctioned by the court to assess my living conditions. My parents arrived with a court-appointed social worker, a woman named Ms. Holloway, who carried a clipboard like a shield. Tyler tagged along, wearing a suit that cost more than his net worth, looking like a vulture circling a carcass. I buzzed them in. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't offer coats. I stood by the kitchen island, arms crossed, watching them violate my sanctuary. Catherine swept in, her heels clicking sharply on the polished concrete. She looked around the loft with a practiced expression of pity and disgust. To her, the exposed brick and industrial beams weren't architectural choices, they were evidence of incompletion. It's so cold, Jasmine, she said, wrapping her cashmere coat tighter around herself. No wonder you're depressed. It feels like a bunker. It's a loft. Mother, I said calmly, and the temperature is kept at a constant 68 degrees for the collection. The collection. Gregory scoffed, wandering toward the climate-controlled storage room. The pile of metal you've barricaded yourself in with. Ms. Holloway was taking notes. I could see her eyes darting from my parents' theatrical concern to the immaculate order of my home. She checked the smoke detectors. She checked the pantry. She found nothing but precision. Tyler didn't care about the pantry. He gravitated immediately toward the biometric vault door at the back of the room. I watched him try to look casual, leaning against the wall near the keypad, his eyes scanning the brand markings. He was calculating. He was wondering if a blowtorch or a hacker could get through the steel. "You look tired, Jasmine," Catherine said, reaching out to touch my arm. I stepped back. "Your eyes are manic. Are you sleeping? This obsession. It's eating you alive. We just want to get you to a facility where you can rest." It was a masterclass in gaslighting. If I argued, I was defensive. If I yelled, I was unstable. So I did neither. I let them perform. I let them call my life small and my mind broken. I let them believe they were the adults in the room, making the hard decisions for the wayward child. I endured it because I was holding a grenade they couldn't see. 3 days ago, while Laura was finalizing our defense, I had done some digging of my own. I pulled the property records for the Lake Forest mansion. I knew they were in trouble. But I hadn't realized the extent of the hemorrhage. They hadn't just refinanced, they had stopped paying. The house was in pre-foreclosure. The bank had bundled the distressed note and put it up for sale on the secondary market. It's a niche market. Buying bad debt? But I know niche markets. I didn't tell Laura. I didn't tell anyone. I simply formed an anonymous LLC, Nemesis Holdings, and wired the funds. I bought the mortgage note for 60 cents on the dollar. I looked at Gregory, who was currently explaining to Ms. Holloway that he feared I was squandering my potential. He didn't know that the roof over his head, the walls he was so proud of, the very floor he stood on it, all belonged to me now. I wasn't just his daughter anymore. I was his lender, and he was 6 months behind on payments. Then I looked at Tyler, still hovering near my safe. The realization clicked into place like a lock tumbling. The equity in the mansion, the money that should have been their retirement. Their safety net, where had it gone? It hadn't gone to repairs. The house was falling apart. It hadn't gone to lifestyle. They were drowning in credit card debt. It had gone to him. They had drained the equity of my childhood home to fund Tyler's crypto scam. They had bet the house on the son who played the part. And they had lost it all. Now, they were trying to seize my assets to cover the bet. "You really should have some flowers in here," Catherine said, turning a full circle. "Something living. It's like a tomb. I like it quiet." I said. "Ms. Holloway clicked her pen. "I think I've seen enough. Ms. Frost appears to be highly organized. The home is safe." "Safe," Gregory exploded, his face flushing. "She's barricaded in here. She's hoarding gold like a dragon while her family is, while we are worried sick." He caught himself. But the slip was there. "While her family is broke." "Thank you for coming," I said, opening the door. "I'll see you in court." They left with a flurry of disappointed sighs and aggressive whispers. I locked the door behind them. I engaged the deadbolt. Then I walked to my desk and opened the file for Nemesis Holdings. I printed out the foreclosure notice. I wouldn't send it yet. I would wait until they were under oath. I would wait until they claimed they were the responsible ones, the providers, the pillars of stability. Then, I would show them who actually held the deed. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was a small room, windowless, designed to contain the messy, Private Tragedies of Family Law. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table, looking like a portrait of dignified sorrow. Catherine dabbed at her dry eyes with a linen handkerchief. Gregory sat tall, radiating the weary authority of a father, forced to make a difficult decision. Their lawyer? Arthur Vance. It was smooth. He painted a picture of me that was almost unrecognizable, a recluse. A woman drowning in compulsive hoarding. A danger to herself. He spoke of my biometric locks as proof of paranoia. He described my climate-controlled storage as a fire hazard filled with junk. I watched them perform. It was flawless. If I hadn't known the truth that they were $10 million in the hole, and desperate for a lifeline, I might have believed them myself. They looked so reasonable. They looked so concerned. When it was our turn, Laura didn't call character witnesses. She didn't bring in doctors to testify to my sanity. She simply stood up and smoothed her skirt. "Your Honor," she said, her voice cutting through the humid air of the room. "The defense calls Jasmine Frost." I walked to the stand. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at the judge. A stern woman named Winslow, who looked like she had seen every lie a human being could tell. "Ms. Frost," Laura began, "the petitioners claim that your home is unsafe and that your assets consist of, quote, piles of worthless metal and paper. Is that accurate?" "No," I said. "Would you please explain to the court the nature of your assets?" "I am a professional numismatist," I said. "My hoard is a curated collection of rare currency and antiquities. It is insured, catalogued, and secured according to bank vault standards." Laura nodded. She picked up the heavy binder, the certified asset inventory, and handed it to the bailiff. "Your Honor, we ask that this inventory be entered into the record. It was verified yesterday by an independent auditor." Judge Winslow nodded to the bailiff. "Read the summary items." "Please." The bailiff, a bored-looking man, with reading glasses perched on his nose, opened the folder. He cleared his throat. "Item 1. He read in a monotone. "Real property, located in the West Loop. Industrial loft conversion. Ownership status, paid in full. Appraised value, $850,000. Silence rippled through the room. I saw Catherine's head snap up. They thought I was renting. They thought I was scraping by. "Item 2. The bailiff continued. Vehicle, 1964, Porsche 356C. Fully restored. Appraised value, $280,000. Tyler, sitting in the gallery behind our parents, actually gasped. He knew cars. He knew what that meant. "Item 3. The bailiff read, turning the page. Numismatic collection, comprising pre-1933 gold coinage, territorial issues, and rare paper currency. Certified value." He paused. He squinted at the number, as if checking for a typo. $4,200,000. The silence in the courtroom wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. My parents weren't looking at the judge anymore. They were looking at me. And in Gregory's eyes, I saw something break. It wasn't just shock. It was a psychological fracture. You have to understand the mind of a narcissist to understand what happened next. To Gregory, I wasn't a person, I was a prop. I was the faulty daughter. The failure that made his success look brighter. My incompetence was a structural pillar of his reality. If I was successful, if I was worth $5 million. Self-made. Without his help, then who was he? He was a fraud, facing prison. He was the failure. The reality I had just presented didn't just contradict his story, it annihilated his self-image. It was a narcissistic injury so deep, so violent, that his mind couldn't process it. He couldn't pivot. He couldn't spin it. He could only explode. The cognitive dissonance shattered him. "You stole it!" The scream tore from his throat. Raw and ugly. Gregory stood up, his chair clattering backward. His face was a mask of purple rage. "She stole it," he roared, pointing a shaking finger at me. "That's my money. That's family money, you ungrateful little bitch. You've been hiding it, while we," Robert Catherine shrieked, grabbing his arm. But he shook her off. He wasn't a lawyer anymore. He wasn't a pillar of the community. He was a predator who had just realized his prey was the one holding the gun. "It's mine," he screamed, lunging toward the aisle. "You owe us. After everything I gave you." Judge Winslow slammed her gavel. The sound like a gunshot. "Stop immediately!" she shouted, her eyes wide with shock at the sudden violence erupting in her court. "Bailiff, get security in here, now." 2 officers burst through the doors. Gregory was panting, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. He looked at me, and for a second, the rage faltered, replaced by a terrifying, naked hunger. He looked at me not like a father looks at a daughter, but like a starving man looks at a meal he just dropped. "Control your client, Mr. Vance," Judge Winslow hissed, her voice trembling with fury. "Or I will hold him in contempt and have him removed in irons." Arthur Vance looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. He pulled Gregory down, whispering frantically. But the damage was done. The mask hadn't just slipped, it had disintegrated. I sat perfectly still. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I watched him unravel. I watched the man who had terrified me for 29 years reduce himself to a screaming, greedy child. And in that moment, the fear finally evaporated. I realized he wasn't a monster. He was just a small, broke man screaming at a mirror because he didn't like the reflection. Judge Winslow didn't just dismiss the case, he evicted it from his courtroom. "Dismissed with prejudice," he said, his voice cold and final. He looked at Arthur Vance. "Counselor, expect a referral to the disciplinary board by morning." The gavel banged. It sounded like a lock snapping shut. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Laura walked beside me, her heels clicking, a steady rhythm of victory. But I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. I had one last transaction to complete. My parents caught up to us in the hallway. The bluster was gone. The rage had evaporated, leaving behind the desperate, sweating reality of 2 people facing federal indictment without a penny to their names. "Jasmine." "Wait," Catherine pleaded, reaching for my arm, but stopping short of touching me. Her eyes were red. We were desperate. "You have to understand. The SEC fines. If we don't pay, your father goes to prison." Gregory stood behind her, looking gray. "We can work this out," he said, his voice shaking. "We're family. You have assets. You can help us. We'll pay you back." I stopped. I turned to face them. For the first time in my life, I didn't see giants. I saw 2 small, frightened people who had built a life on debt and deception. "I can't help you with the fines," I said. "My assets are illiquid. They're tied up in investments." "Investments?" Gregory asked, hope flickering in his eyes. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single, thin envelope. I had been carrying it since the day I bought the note. I handed it to him. "This investment." Gregory opened it. He pulled out the document. It wasn't a check. It was a notice of default and election to sell. But the lender listed at the top wasn't the bank anymore. It was Nemesis Holdings LLC. He looked up at me. Confusion warring with horror. Nemesis Holdings who? Me. I said. I bought your distressed mortgage note 3 months ago. The bank was happy to offload it. Catherine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You own the house. I own the debt. I corrected. And you are 6 months in arrears. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. This was the philosophy I had lived by for years. Success is the best revenge because it doesn't require you to get your hands dirty. You don't have to scream at people who hurt you. You just have to outgrow them. You have to build a tower so high that they can't reach the doorbell. I'm not going to evict you immediately, I said, watching the color drain from my father's face. That would be cruel. You have 30 days to vacate. I suggest you use that time to find a good criminal defense attorney. I hear Arthur Vance is available. I turned and walked away. I heard Catherine sobbing behind me. But I didn't stop. I walked out of the courthouse, into the bright, biting Chicago wind, and I felt lighter than I had ever felt in my life. That night, back in my loft, I opened the vault. I pulled out a single coin, a 1907 high-relief St. Gaudens double eagle. It is widely considered the most beautiful coin ever minted in America. It is heavy, solid gold, and flawless. I sat in my armchair, the city lights twinkling outside my window, and I held the coin up to the light. It was silent. It was valuable. It was mine. I wasn't the faulty daughter anymore. I wasn't the hoarder. I was the sovereign of my own life. And my silence, it wasn't empty. It was golden. If you've ever had to build your own peace while everyone around you was building chaos, hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to know that their silence is a superpower. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice, served cold.